and experiences. So first, I usually start by introducing AMAKEN. AMAKEN Placemaking is the Arab world for public network for public space. شبكة العالم العربي لصناعة الأماكن. It started a little bit before 2020, but the official announcement was in the World Urban Forum, number 10, that happened in Abu Dhabi. So that was the official announcement to the globe, if I may say. And so it's a nonprofit multidisciplinary network acting as a platform to share knowledge and opportunities. It empowers local community to work on upgrading and managing public spaces in the Arab world. It focuses on transforming public spaces into vibrant places according to the national and international norms and standards while preserving the local identity. Yeah, and just by the way, these two pictures in the bottom are in Riyadh, and I took them during a placemaking workshop that happened, as you can see, with lots of engagement from the people, even women, which is not a common practice, but now it is improving a lot by engaging more women. Members of this network can be architects, urban planners, landscape architects, designers, activists, public artists, social scientists, and government officials. So it's not limited to urban designers or landscape architects, which sometimes people think that. No, it's actually a very interdisciplinary network. And those who shape the public space can come from any background as long as they're concerned with the public space and are able to contribute to it. So it's shaped by people. So it's not limited to disciplines like architecture or landscape architecture. Our mission is to work with the community to transform public spaces into safe and vibrant places, utilizing local resources and preserving the local identity. So we work as facilitators, initiators, moderators, and service provider. As I showed in the pictures in Riyadh, where we were very engaged in working with the local policies and also people, including marginalized groups of immigrants. Our field of activities include shaping and influencing policies. So we work across scales and strategies that are related to urban development, socioeconomic development, environmental protection, and institutional development. Raising awareness about process of placemaking, developing and implementing solutions and alternative public spaces, connecting people together through creating safe and vibrant places. And I have to say, many of our members, for those who don't know, are actually practicing this even outside the network on their own business. So there are some good executed projects in the past few months by like Jadda Walkway or some placemaking happening in Riyadh, etc. And we have a lot of also today with us as audience, masters and PhD students are interested in the process of shaping the public space. Our sister networks are Placemaking X, which is led by Fred Kent and Ethan Kent. Also Placemaking Europe, where I'm actually a member in, and we collaborate a lot and exchange a lot of experiences with them. Because Placemaking Europe and AMAKEN fall relatively within very close time zone, so we have a larger window to coordinate, and some of our members are based in Europe as well. We also have local partners such as Mugawra, Jama'at al-Fikr al-Umrani, Wal-Athar Lana, which are interested initiatives that focuses on community development in general, but with a specific focus on public space development. These are some of the inspiring quotes by those who put people in the center of the design process. As Jane Jacobs said, as you all know, cities have the capability of providing something for everybody, only because and only when they are created by everybody. And that's something we strive to do. William White, what attracts people most, it would appear, is other people. And of course, Yangel, who everyone knows really well, whose quote, cultures and climates differ all over the world, but people are the same. They'll gather in public if you give them a good place to do that. Quote. Please mute yourself. I invite you also to visit our website, which is AMAKENPlacemaking.org, and it will show you a lot of the activities we're doing, training, capacity building. And if you go to the Contact Us tab, you will find two links. One is for membership, if you are not yet a member and you want to join, or if you have an interesting experience to share with us, or a research or a real project, you can fill the form of a Making Coffee Break form, and then you become one of our speakers. So we all learn from you as we go. These are our social media handles or connections. So we are on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and we have a WhatsApp group. So if you decide to join, then it will be a good idea to take you through these as well and be a member of those. One of the recent activities that we're very proud of is some of our steering committee members, when Beirut explosion happened, mobilized resources and connect with their colleagues in Lebanon and started to give them, I wouldn't say advice, but sharing experiences in other countries and how other countries dealt with this. And also through networking, how can we help each other overcome even challenges that are even beyond the public space. And I'm very proud of this activity that is done by colleagues in the steering committee. These are samples of the different coffee talks that we offered in AMAKEN. Talks we covered so many countries like Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Saudi, Syria, Sudan, and the coming one is going to be from Tunisia. Today, we open up a little bit beyond the Arab world to learn about a common challenge that has to do with climate change and community vulnerability. And this is today's talk, and it's going to be by James Stickley, titled Placemaking in the Context of Climate Change and Community Vulnerability. Jim is a landscape architect and a dear friend to me, an urban designer with 40 years of experience in urban design, community design, and planning, and landscape architecture. His experience on a number of complex projects, both domestically and internationally, has spanned the full spectrum from large-scale planning assignments to detailed design and implementation projects. Jim has extensive experience in developing plans to enhance urban districts and public space, including complex projects involving community engagement. Jim serves as design principal of WRT in San Francisco office, where he oversees the landscape architecture and urban design projects. I want to add also, he has a very specific interest and experience in cities beyond the Bay Area, and he's interested in solutions for climate change and covering also the social part, like local communities. I know Jim since 2013, I think, when I used to live in the Bay Area in the West Coast, and our friendship continued. I continue to learn from him as we go. Jim, it's a pleasure to have you. And now I'll stop sharing my screen and you should be able to share, and the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Amir, for that very kind introduction. I'm so thrilled to be here and to engage with this group. I'm really glad that Amir has brought me into this opportunity. And as Amir says, I think we're realizing in our practice that as a globe, we're facing common challenges right now, and we have to communicate with each other. And although my practice through the years has been has included a lot of international work. My focus in the last couple of decades really has been here in California. It's been very regionally focused. And so I'm really going to focus on that work. It's the work that's most immediate for me. And I think it also highlights that, you know, although we live in very different geographies, we have common interests and we can really learn from each other. And so I look forward to sharing my experiences, but I also look forward to a discussion where I can learn from all of you. I'm going to try to keep my presentation shorter than the time Amir gave me, to allow more space for conversation. That's really what I'm interested in. I think Amir and I have had a great friendship and dialogue over the years. I think we realized very quickly that we were sort of, in a way, cross-cultural brothers with a lot of common interests and values. And so I'm really happy to have this opportunity. One thing I just want to add is my own connection to the Arab world. I spent a good part of my childhood in Lebanon. My father was a professor of economics, agricultural economics at the American University of Beirut. And I have very deep affinity for that region, with a lot of strong memories and I think a lot of strong influences about how cities really work. Beirut was such an amazing example of a commercial and cultural center where different ethnicities were coexisting in harmony. The streets were vibrant, public spaces were vibrant, and I think a lot of my city making perspective is rooted in the 5 years I spent there. I was a kid who we lived on the university, but I could walk outside the gates anytime I wanted to, and you know, move through the city freely. And I know Beirut has changed a lot since then. I've had the good fortune to reconnect with the director of the landscape and ecology program there recently, Yasser Abu Nasser, and he's brought me into some great discussions about the port replanning. And so, yes, as Amir says, I'm very interested in what other cities are doing and how people are thinking. I very much enjoyed listening to the greetings this morning of the Ahlan Mosahlan, Ahlan Bik, Ahlan Fik. It really brings up so many strong emotions for me. So really, really happy to be here. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. And it says I'm disabled participant. So can you enable me?
Yes, yes.
You are a co-host now, Jem. You can go ahead.
Can I do it? Okay, there we go.
Yes.
Great. Let me see. Okay, can everyone see? Can everyone see this screen?
Not yet. It's coming. It's still a black canvas. I thought we have the weakest internet in the Middle East, but what's happening in California?
We've had our problems recently.
I can tell.
Should I try to reshare?
It's saying processing. So if you want to stop and try again and just give it some time.
Okay, I'm going to stop share and then try to reshare once more.
Yes, now it is working.
Excellent.
I can make it full screen now, and I'll mute myself.
Great. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, so placemaking in the context of climate change and community vulnerability. So again, Jim Stickley, principal with WRT, Planning and Design. We are a firm of planners, urban designers, architects, and landscape architects. So we're what we call an interdisciplinary firm, and it's interdisciplinary rather than multidisciplinary because we realized a while back that we were all sitting in our disciplinary silos and we weren't interacting to the benefit of our collective practice. So we're trying to be much more deliberate about how we interact between our disciplines, but also interact with other disciplines outside of our firm. We have an architecture practice only in Philadelphia, and the San Francisco office where I reside has planning, urban design, and landscape architecture. And I am trained as a landscape architect, but I very much work across these disciplines and believe that that is extremely beneficial to what we are trying to accomplish as a part of our practice. And I'll talk more about that. We're organized around 4 practice areas: community design, which is mostly where the space where I work. And I would describe it as city making at all scales. And then our housing and neighborhoods practice is largely focused on affordable housing. So this is a huge component of our firm's mission to promote social equity. And we have a very robust practice in affordable housing architecture, but also the planning and urban design that precedes those architecture projects, which are about neighborhood restructuring and the establishment of better equity in communities in which we work. Parks and open space, just like it sounds, and then education. We have quite a large practice in higher ed, so campus planning, and then landscape architecture for campus spaces, and then in our Philadelphia office, campus architecture as well. So that's a little synopsis of the firm. Our practice ethos is rooted in ecological planning, social equity, and a community-based planning process. And the firm was started by this gentleman, and it strikes me as Amir put up the other faces of leading voices in the placemaking realm, that we're missing some faces and some leading voices. These look like a lot of white people to me, and I'm just very conscious of that in our era now of social justice and the social unrest that we've had in America recently, that we really need to be better about including all voices. And so just wanted to say I'm aware awareness is maybe the first step to doing something about it. Nevertheless, Ian McHarg was one of the fathers of the environmental movement in the early 60s, started this firm, and his book, Design with Nature, really set a tone for ecologically based planning and design. Since then, and especially in recent decades, we have gotten much more rooted in social equity as part of our project, as part of our practice. So balancing between ecologically driven strategies and socially driven strategies, I think, is really at the core of our practice areas. As I said before, we work across scales and professional disciplines to create forward-thinking, actionable solutions that meet the unique needs of the communities that we serve. We've been very fortunate to be recognized by our industry for a number of local and national awards. And I want to pause there and talk about how we view resilient communities. This is my hometown. This is San Francisco. This is where I've spent the last 20, 25 or so years of my life and raised my family. And it's a unique place. It's special, but it's also so full of challenges, and many of those challenges really coming to a head in recent years. This is actually one of my morning bike rides. I come up on this high point, and it really gives me this wonderful perspective of not only the city, but the greater Bay Area. And just a reminder of how interconnected we are as a broader community. There's been a lot of recent discussion about resilience here in the Bay Area, starting with the Resilient by Design ideas competition, which some of you may have heard of. It was a cousin that followed the Rebuild by Design ideas competition that happened on the East Coast after Hurricane Sandy, and really has been a very strong influence in our industry in helping us think about resiliency. And I would say that the perhaps the weakness of both of those efforts was their focus on shoreline as sort of the sole area of intervention for resiliency. And I think what we've realized in our practice is that for our communities to be resilient, they have to look much more broadly at many more factors. So although sea level rise is an important issue, in a sense, it's predictable. You know, it's going to happen incrementally over the years, and in a sense, we can plan for that and do something about it slowly over time. It doesn't have the urgency that perhaps other aspects of climate change have, aspects that are much more unpredictable, social unrest that can come up very unpredictably based on inequities that are perceived in our communities, wildfires, which can happen, which we're being devastated by in California right now, and can happen very unexpectedly. Economic downturns, which can come in unexpected ways. How can we prepare our communities to be resilient to all of those impacts? And so that's what I want to talk about a little bit. So we view resilience as a holistic approach to the interrelated factors of community health and well-being. It's part of a more timeless challenge to create environments that help communities survive and thrive in the context of change. And I wanted to emphasize that our practice and our processes are deeply rooted in community engagement. It's just so critical. For our work to be successful, it needs committed champions, people that are invested in these communities and are invested in change. And we believe that engaging these people from the earliest stages of the planning and design process gives our work a much better chance of continuing and being implemented and being successful in terms of the change it brings to those communities. So we take community engagement very seriously. We think that's where most of the good ideas come from in the design and planning process. We also try to bring good, strong ideas from our team, but we do think that it's a combination and a dialogue that happens between our team and the community that make that make our work successful. So what are the elements of resilience as we view them? So we think that there are 5 factors, and recently I've been thinking there's one missing, and we can talk about that. But these are sort of the 5 factors that we think are essential to resilient communities: social equity, ecological systems, green infrastructure, which is very vitally linked to ecological systems, public health and open space, and economic vitality. So our practice helps protect communities from a wide range of impacts, whether they're related to severe weather, wildland fires, long-term sea level rise, changing economies, or are social in their root causes. Communities with a strong foundation of these elements are more successful in adapting to change and responding to challenges. To achieve these, structural change is needed in our communities. These principles are what guide our work. So just really briefly, in each of the 5, equitable communities are fundamentally more successful across a range of economic, social, and cultural indicators, and ultimately more resilient to a wide range of impacts. Thriving communities have access to education, a diversity of jobs, healthy food, clean air and water, parks and open space. From this foundation, communities are ultimately more resilient to a wide range of impacts, both socioeconomic and natural. Ecological systems are the backbone networks of our Earth's vital functions: clean air, clean water, carbon sequestration, and biodiversity that supports all living organisms, including humans, must have healthy and functioning ecosystems. Green infrastructure. Solutions seek to narrow the gap between engineered infrastructure and natural ecosystems using low energy strategies, people-powered functions, and biologically based solutions. Public health and open space access, creating environments where people can be assured of clean air, clean water, access to healthy food, open space, and exercise, as well as vital support services, will ensure socially and economically vital communities. And finally, economic vitality. Economic vitality provides the financial lifeline of a community, creating a diverse business economic ecosystem that spans the spectrum of small local businesses to large stable employers, provides safeguards against the ups and downs of economic cycles, and is more resilient to a wide range of impacts. So how do we ensure that our work advances the structural change that helps build a foundation of these critical elements? And in so doing, how can we move into place the elements that also ensure successful placemaking? So these two are very much related. In my mind, the structural change that cities need to undergo to make them resilient, and then in so doing, what I call setting the table for placemaking strategies. And I do feel that and I don't know what disciplines are represented here today. I'm assuming there's a lot of landscape architects, but I would also imagine that there are a lot of planners. I want to hear more from you after this about where you're coming from in terms of your discipline and your perspective. But I want to stress that as landscape architects, I think we have the ability to interact with planners and urban designers in really all disciplines in an extremely effective way, and that we need to engage at the different scales of planning and design. We need to, if not lead those conversations, we need to be in those conversations that are doing the table setting, that are doing the restructuring of our cities. Just because we have that perspective, we're trained as holistic thinkers, and I think, you know, I'm biased for sure, but I think we do that better than many other disciplines. So just wanted to make that point. So I wanted to talk, I think Amir is familiar with this project. I think I presented it to his class maybe 10 years ago or a little bit less. And it is a project that we've been working on for quite a long time. It's a very large, complex site, a brownfield site just south of San Francisco. and it's extremely challenging. You know, it's over 500 acres, you know, a seeming huge opportunity to provide a lot of the infrastructure and housing and jobs that are needed in the Bay Area, but it's extremely complicated to do so. The portion of the site on the left, this used to be part of the bay, so it's all landfill. And the portion on the left where you see the train track alignments is actually filled with earthquake rubble from the 1906 earthquake. So when San Francisco was destroyed by that earthquake, they had to have a place to put all of that rubble, and this was one of the places they put it. And then they built a rail yards on top of it, which became a critical piece of the freight infrastructure for San Francisco. And then Highway 101 was built here on the right, and between the two, a municipal landfill was put into action, and that operated for about 30 years. And so because of those, that history of landfill, there's some big challenges. The portion on the right where the municipal landfill is very restricted. There can be no residential uses on that. There can be parklands, there can be commercial office, campus sites, but no residential. The portion on the right, or on the left rather, is a little bit more stable, but it's still subject to settling, and it can be the recipient of a more broad range of land uses. So as we looked at the planning of this site, I think we are looking for opportunities to affect the needed components of restructuring. So how can we affect economic vitality by concentrating jobs centers, retail and office uses? How can we promote social equity by creating an integrated place for affordable housing, not something that's set off somewhere to the side, but something that's integrated within the fabric of a mixed-use residential neighborhood? How can we promote public health by creating an open space network? How do we ensure mobility with a robust transit network? And how can we undo the wrongs of the past in taking over a productive part of the bay with its productive wetland fringes and its hydrological function? How can we restore as much of that function as possible in a new plan? So we start, as we always do, with a broader view of hydrology and ecological and open space framework, and try to think about how we can be integrated and promote a continuation of that framework. And then how does that hydrology play out in the new plan to perform the stormwater functions and also the ecological functions that it's able to do? How do the habitat systems link with an open space network and bring back ecological function? How does a street network ensure connectivity along with a bicycle and pedestrian framework? And how can we link vital transit to discourage automobile use and concentrate density where these transit networks are concentrated? And so this shows the land uses and increasing density as we go north in the site and concentrated around transit, and then a decreasing density as we go south, where we have workplace campus sites. Tech campuses are a big thing in the Bay Area right now. There's lots of companies looking for campus sites. So the purple in the south are creating opportunity for those sites, but also a very open space heavy framework in the southern portion of the site. And this was the resulting plan, and this project is now in completing its environmental reviews and getting very close to its first implemented phases. This is a view of the southern portion with the workplace campus sites and open space networks. And then this is a view of the northern neighborhoods, very much mixed use, mostly residential with some commercial office, but a vibrant mix of retail and ground floor uses and outdoor dining. And again, this is part of the table setting for placemaking. So if we can get these uses, these land uses and their mix and the transportation frameworks all working together and in their right place, then it makes our job as the detailed designers of placemaking that much more easy, because all the ingredients we need for successful activation and cultural influences and all of those things have been put roughly into place. And just moving to another project example, this is a project that we worked on in the East Bay that began with what was called a strategic redevelopment plan. So this was looking for how to revitalize this downtown area through land use changes and infill, but also the development of public space, mainly in this corridor spine that runs through the downtown. In essence, this community wanted to create a main street where they never had one, because this was an old state highway. And so our strategies looked at how they could do that, not only from a public space standpoint, but how the land use strategies and the infill strategies align to make that a vibrant place. So these were the sort of the three nodes and opportunities for infill that we studied, and they each had a different theme. One was more cultural and entertainment in its emphasis. Another one was more retail oriented, and the other one had more cultural facilities, a new library, and some park space and other community oriented uses. And then we had the good fortune to also be able to look at more detail at the corridor itself, the main street itself, and to go into a detailed design phase as a first step towards implementation of this project. And we took a very detailed look at how all of the critical elements of street design can come together to create a new place with a new function and a new character, and how to make more humane, spacious bus stops, how to create more space for safe bike lanes that you can see in the dark red, how to create hydrological function through permeable pavers in the on-street parking zones, and also continuous soil trenches where the street trees are. That becomes part of a hydrological system that is joined together, as well as something that enhances greening strategies. Rainwater gardens in bulb outs in the corners, and widened sidewalks. So that was one of the big moves of this plan. And I want to say that you all are probably looking at this and saying that looks like a very wide American street. And you're absolutely right. It was something that we battled in this project. It was lane reduction. And we almost convinced this community to eliminate an additional lane in each direction, but we couldn't quite get the traffic analysis to support. Can everyone still hear me?
Yes, you were muted for 10 seconds, so you
Okay.
can go back to the traffic analysis and carry on.
Yeah, so we worked very hard to prove that we didn't need 2 lanes in each direction. And at the end of the day, we couldn't make the numbers pencil with our traffic engineer. But it's not all hope is lost. That can still be something that is done in the future. And I think it's something that we need to keep striving for, is to continually challenge those numbers, the notion that we need to maintain traffic flows in order for a place to be successful. And I think we're much more of a proponent of people flows instead of car flows. So if we can get the same numbers of people to flow, either as pedestrians or transit riders or bikes, and take them out of their cars and reallocate the space from car-oriented function to these other functions, that's the aim. What we were able to do here is narrow the lanes considerably, which allowed us to put in generous bike lanes, which allowed us to widen sidewalks, and which allowed us to put in a pretty robust green infrastructure network in this area. The continuous soil trench was huge here. We used suspended paving or silvacells in the areas between the trees, so that the soil's volume is there and the roots can spread laterally. We put permeable paving in the parking lane so that hydrologically these areas are connected, and this has been the result. So it's been, I would say, very successful. It has become much more of a center for community social life. And these pictures are actually not that recent, but the trees have absolutely thrived in this area. They're probably 5 times bigger than what you're seeing here. So it's been successful in that regard as well. And it feels safe for all ages, from 8 to 80. The community is really out enjoying their new Main Street. And then on a recent visit, we were really delighted to see private initiatives taking hold. So this is our hope as public space designers, is that we will be the catalyst for private investment. And here a developer bought an old, very nondescript, boxy warehouse and turned it into this market building. So it has different purveyors inside, small grocery store, but also a brewery and a butcher and an olive oil vendor, all inside, places where you can get food. And then outside, they took over this alley and turned it into a public space where people can do outdoor dining. Musicians can come and perform, and this has literally become the place to be on a Friday and Saturday night in Castro Valley. So we're just really delighted to see that that something like this has been catalyzed by the public space improvements that we made. I wanted to run through this pretty quickly. This is a park design that we completed a couple of years ago, and this is in Mission Bay. So this is another bay of San Francisco that was filled after the 1906 earthquake. They had a lot of rubble and they needed a lot of bays to fill in, unfortunately. And so this was another bay with a thriving ecology that was landfilled, but it is a vital project for the city. Mission Bay provides a new job center, a new UC campus, an educational campus around healthcare. There are biotech industries that have located here, and lots of housing. And so part of the Mission Bay plan is that there were certain public space commitments that the developer made, and different thresholds of development triggered the building of those public spaces. So Mariposa Park was one of those. We got the commission to design it in a community-based process. And what was interesting here is that the park was on the edge of Mission Bay and served not only Mission Bay, but also the Potrero Hill community and the Dog Patch community. So it was a more complex community process that engaged all of those neighborhoods. And in our placemaking approach, we really try to look deeply at natural history, influences, and ecology, as well as cultural history. So before it was filled, this was part of the bay, and there was a big wetland fringe that ran right through our site, as you can see on the left. And then after it was filled, it became an important rail yard for the city, another important rail yard. And you can see these, you know, arguably it's very industrial, but also some beautiful shapes in terms of the flows of train tracks. And the in the area of our site, an old train barn or a roundhouse with a turntable in the center where engines came in and were turned and then rolled into the shed for repair, and then little spur tracks where the waiting trains would sit before the repair. So lots of interesting sort of historic cues to work with. So we really attempted to reflect some of those things. So a very large habitat or ecological move surrounding the multi-use lawn with just all native species, very strict ecological palette. And then in the top right, an expression of the old roundhouse and turntable in a plaza element. And another unique opportunity of this project is that there was an excess of fill by the master developer, and we were given the challenge to use as much of it as we could. And so we embraced that in the not only the creation of landform, but also for buffering the adjacent freeway on the left, where we could mound up quite sharply, plant trees, and use that as a visual and noise buffer to the freeway, but also a filter for pollutants that are coming off of that vehicular corridor. So this is a view of the designed project, and this is a view of the completed project looking from the other angle. And you can, this is looking south towards Dog Patch, which was a very industrial neighborhood, but a very interesting and exciting redevelopment that's happening there using the old industrial language. And then this is a view of our park with the train spur tracks being expressed as gabion walls, and this, as I said, a strong ecological move of this habitat wrapping around the central lawn space. The habitat is particularly focused on an endangered butterfly species to try to reestablish it here, and they are having some success in that reestablishment. And then this is the roundhouse and turntable plaza as it was planned and designed. And then this is the completed plaza, and it's become a very popular gathering place, not only for the community, but for the adjacent hospital and campus, where workers can come out and have their lunch, and patients' families can come out for respite and that sort of thing. And then lastly, I want to talk about this project, which is a small town in the North Bay called Windsor. This is up in wine country. And we've had the good fortune to be involved with this community for a number of years in several initiatives. And their big challenge was that their historic downtown had been displaced to a mall across the freeway. And so that's where the community was gathering, and their downtown was dying, their historic downtown. And so they underwent a series of strategies, including the redevelopment of their old downtown and civic center area, anchored with this big move of public space to try to recenter the community towards its historic downtown. And so we had the opportunity to work on this redevelopment project. And so the historic downtown is towards the bottom of the sheet, where you can see the retail frontages. And then the town green was planned to anchor this area, and then an additional redevelopment and growth strategy for the northern part of the downtown, going up into these northern blocks. And one of the things that came up time and again in this community was the importance of their heritage oak trees. And so they really became the central influence in the structuring of their downtown plan. So our process carefully located where the heritage oak trees were, including the hydrology systems that help them thrive. And then we encapsulated those oak trees. Sorry, I just lost my sound. I want to make sure. Can everybody still hear me? Okay. We encapsulated those oak trees in protective envelopes around each grove, and then recognized where the axial connections were to adjacent streets and views to the town green and to the old Main Street, and then the street pattern that ensured all of those relationships and the associated parcels that would be available for infill and for redevelopment, and how the ownership of these lands would influence phasing and partnerships, and then finally the plan itself. So the strategy was to enclose the town green with additional mixed use with an active ground floor frontage, and to provide additional sites for their expanding civic center, town hall, library, police north of that, and then further north, housing parcels where they could bring more affordable housing for young workers and seniors into the downtown area at a higher density. And this was a view of the expanded downtown from that plan. And then we had the good fortune to be involved with the town green design itself. And so this design was really rooted in the agricultural heritage of the valley before vineyards. This was very invested in different kinds of orchards, and so expressing orchard patterns as well as the native oak trees, and then sort of resolving these two different geometries of the old town and the new town, and how those geometries came together in these different axial arrangements. And this is the completed town green. It's a place for outdoor performances that happen in the center stage, and also for farmers markets that you can see in the edge, and in this sort of decomposed granite plaza zone. And this really has had the intended effect that it has recentered the town in its historic heart. It's become really the heart of community life, with lots of concerts and activities that happen in the plaza. And the design language really was very simple, but it responded again to the agricultural heritage, to the idea of irrigation canals, and that certainly was an influence in the detailing of our design. So that's it. Hope I left plenty of time for discussion. I wanted to stress that we're collaborators. In order for our work to be successful, it requires partnering with a broad range of different partners and disciplines. We engage our partners for their critical expertise in areas such as hydrology, engineering, architecture, ecology, transportation, and economics. And I look forward to discussing your ideas about how to create more resilient communities and how to make better places. Shukran.
Thank you, Jim, very much. Very thoughtful presentation. You took us through very interesting projects. I actually have 99 questions, but I'm going to keep them now and see if our colleagues here have any specific questions for you, and I will bring my questions later. Okay, hands up. Dr. Kholi, of course, go ahead.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Amir. I have 3 sets of comments. The first, regarding your 5 points, I think that at the heart of all those 5, it's the institutional framework, how decision is made, your client, the community. And so institutional framework is at the heart of sustainable development. That's what has been said since Joe Berg in 2002. And I think it is key for the sustainability of your projects. So that's one point I would like you to shed light on. The second is about the use of technology and the 4th industrial revolution. Like Internet of Things, blockchain. How do you think in the future, actually, how these quickly evolving technologies are taking place and the business are pushing them will be of use for developing those placemaking and public spaces for vibrant ones. My third comes to the issue about resilience. And coming from environmental perspective, the first step about discussing the resilience of a community, it's about the risk assessment and management by identifying the source of the threat, the hazard itself, path, and then the response. Then we look into the prevention, the preparedness, rebuilding, and rehabilitation. And when you say your projects are doing seeking a resilient community, which is part of what SDG 11 is seeking, and the targets of SDG 11, I didn't feel how your projects are really addressing these points. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim, do you want to elaborate a little bit on that before we move to other questions?
Sure. Thank you for those questions. So all really excellent points. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you consider to be the institutional framework? Are you talking about institutional as in the governmental and political framework in terms of what's driving the projects?
Exactly. I mean, you have changes and regimes and parties, different. So, and then fiscal issues in the city hall. All of that has impact on your design and how you as a professional is dealing with those. There's private sector or certain interests. Stakeholders are not always in accord on what they really want. There are always competing interests there.
Yeah.
So that's one of the issues about the institutional setup. There are people who can influence, but they don't have interest. Others have interest, but they don't have the authority, and so on.
Yes. All those things are true in our socio-political culture here in California. You know, extremely competitive agenda. One of, I think, just, you know, it's such a huge topic, we could spend the rest of the time talking about it, but I think one of the areas where that's playing out in real time right now is the sort of the NIMBY movement, the not in my backyard people who do not want density infill in their communities because of a sort of a protectionist attitude, a preservation of their real estate value, and exclusion of certain types of people that they think are not part of their community. And that's been extremely strong in the Bay Area. And in the meantime, you have regional policymakers that are saying, we're now following a a blueprint for the Bay, which concentrates new density around transit. And that has come in direct conflict with the NIMBY attitudes. And for a long time, that conflict was leading to a lack of progress in these areas. So the regional agencies had the right idea, but the community backlash was so strong and the legal challenges were so strong that progress was not happening. And so what has happened more recently, in really just the past less than 5 years, is the state has come in with mandates for affordable housing quota. And every community is now required to identify where affordable housing will be introduced into their community. And if a community is unable to resolve that, the state can now intervene. And so a community still has the choice of whether they want to figure out where density goes or whether they would like the state to come in and figure it out for them. And I think that has definitely created a much more fertile environment for communities opening up and figuring things out. So I think, you know, there's also a lot of grassroots activism, which I think is a huge factor. There's a counterculture to the NIMBY group who promote social equity and who promote higher density infill, and those voices are also getting much more strong now in communities around the Bay. So I would say that those are, you know, just some very recent examples of this institutional framework that you're speaking about. I can maybe just address the other two issues really briefly, just to, you know, just so other folks have a chance to comment. So the use of technology, this whole smart cities movement, as it's called, I think is definitely coming into view a lot more in projects that we work on. It is not the sort of the solution that I think everyone hoped that it would be in the beginning. I think that you know, certain threads of smart city technologies are being implemented, but I think there's also been a realization in our industry that very simple changes, tactical urbanism, you know, land use changes are, you know, just as effective to solving some of our endemic problems as applying technological solutions. So I think it's like everything else. We are settling in on an approach that combines technology with other strategies. And but having said that, transit systems have become much more sophisticated in terms of, you know, real-time schedules and interfaces for riders and information that's displayed at bus stops and things like that. But those are also coupled with very bold physical changes like dedicated bus lanes and things like that. So I think it's really just finding a way for the technological systems to work with the other strategies to, you know, to create the change that we're seeking. And then, yeah, resilience. I think you bring up a point that is the subject of a lot of fierce debate, both in our firm and in our industry, which is, you know, does resilience planning refer to only natural phenomena like sea level rise and storm impacts? And I think what we're saying in our practice is that it is one of the indicators of resilience, one of the challenges of resilience that our communities are facing. And if, you know, what the Resilience by Design Ideas Competition did is it placed a lot of importance with shoreline strategies. And I think what we realized that in a sense, that had a certain degree of inequity in terms of getting support to communities that needed support. The increase of affordable housing supply, the increase of job opportunities, that many of those strategies were happening in upland areas that weren't associated with shorelines, but were creating as much vulnerability to a community as these natural phenomena were. So how do we take a more balanced view of resilience, which, you know, includes all of the natural risks, which are, you know, measurable and which we can apply, you know, a lot of techniques to understanding their impacts, but also look at these other aspects of resilience.
All right, thank you, Jim. We have two more hands. I will go, I think, Taysir, then Mohammed, then maybe me. Okay, let's go for Taysir first.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jim, for a very interesting and inspiring presentation. I would like to refer to one of the statements you referred to along your presentation about structural change. You mentioned that the structural changes are needed to achieve resilience and wide range of impacts. I would like, if you can elaborate more, what kind of changes, maybe from your experience from those projects that you presented. And I would like also to know more about, is this only from the institutional point of view or also from a project management? From the starting or initiation of the project till the end, to what extent this change happens or developed along the project, especially if you are dealing with community design and different levels. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Great question. So I think structural change, for me, it comes down to land use and transportation, mainly.
I think you're unmuted.
Jim, you're muted. Please unmute yourself.
Oops, sorry about that.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the question. These are really great questions. So I think structural change for me mostly comes down to land use and transportation strategies. How do we reorganize, densify, remix our land uses within our existing urbanized areas? And how do we retool our transportation systems to accommodate those land use changes? So I think if I were asked to boil it down, yeah, I think there's a lot more structural change that we're involved with, but if I had to boil it down, it would be to those two things. And I think part of that now is also how we're dealing with the urban edge. You know, in California, we are in big trouble right now because we've allowed sprawl to go out into areas that are very vulnerable to wildfire, and we're having a lot of crisis and hardship around that. Sprawl is also eliminating our agricultural lands in the Central Valley. It's also taxing our infrastructure networks. There's sort of a free spending approach to expanding infrastructure to promote sprawl developers. But then once all is said and done, communities are not able to pay sufficiently to maintain that infrastructure. So we're creating huge challenges for our future. And right now we're debating the new infrastructure package in the Biden administration. The problem is that we've not been able to maintain our infrastructure for years, and now we're paying the price. So I think part of the structural change is also rethinking our urban growth strategies and the urban growth limit lines, and turning growth inward to more infill strategies, and more and more discouraging the sprawl approach.
Thank you, Jim. We now go to Mohammed, then me, then Shahm, or maybe Mohammed, then Shahm, then me. Okay, Mohammed, go ahead. Abu Samra. Me. You're muted. You're still muted. Maybe it's your speakers. Okay, shall we move to Shahm, Alush, then until Mohammed fixed his mic. Mohammed, maybe you need to unplug your earpods after Shahm. Shahm, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Amir. Sorry, I took your turn, so I apologize for that.
ما فيش فرق.
Maybe. James, thank you very much for this interesting presentation. It was really inspiring to see how the design intention meet people needs with the picture that you showed us. My question actually is more methodological. As you know, in the Middle East, the co-planning, collaborative planning is kind of new notion in the Middle East, and AMAKEN focuses on the Middle East. I wonder if we could benefit from your massive experience about how best to engage communities, which method you used, because we know from the literature that one of the main obstacles is to get people involved, to get the community participate efficiently in these co-creation events or co-planning events. How did you manage to get people in? Which method you used? Was it public hearing? You did interviews to elicit people concerns? You did the questionnaires? How you manage from methodological point of view?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. So yes, all of those techniques, and our practice has been rooted in community engagement. Since before I was with the firm, so it's part of our culture. And I think when we write our scopes of service, we write in the appropriate combination of engagement techniques and activities that want to happen throughout the design process, throughout the planning process. I think that that's in California where I practice most. I think that is also embedded in agency thinking. So when we see RFPs coming out from agencies, they are stressing the importance of community engagement. I think that there's a combination of motivations for that. One is political cover. I think cities have learned the hard way that if they don't engage the community will come back to resist policies that are inappropriate. So that's one motivation. I think the other motivation is that more and more in our industries, I think that agencies are realizing that these community processes benefit the initiatives, that they make policies more tailored to community needs, and that's a good thing for everybody. So I would say it is embedded in our culture, and and we use all different techniques. I think one thing that has changed a lot during COVID is that we haven't been able to have the face-to-face workshops as much. So those were very common before COVID. We might get 50 people in a space, sometimes 100 people, and we have different formats for presenting, but also doing a lot of breakout groups. And I'm sure you all are familiar with this, but there's a central setting of the stage, and then there's a splitting up of the attendees into smaller groups where they can get into deeper discussions. And we use that a lot. And that's a way to cover a lot of ground. We allow we actually require that each of the breakout groups has a spokesperson from the community that can report back on the findings of their group. So, you know, at a very small level, we're encouraging ownership in the community of ideas. And that general structure of a central conversation and then breakout groups, we've actually been able to maintain now in virtual formats. So as I'm sure you all know, Zoom has the ability to have breakout groups. We're using things like Concept Board and other softwares that allow online drawing and online, you know, submitting of comments and things like that. So we're using those tools more than ever. And there was a moment in early COVID when all of our client agencies froze. They didn't know what to do. You know, they were freaking out in a sense. And I think they were thinking that the restrictions of COVID were going to stop the community engagement processes. And I think we were able to, not, you know, completely, but in many cases, we were able to come in and say, don't worry, we can keep the momentum of the conversation going by using these virtual techniques. We had already started to use them on a limited basis before, and we were able to really just amplify those and their use. And so we were able to get those processes started again. It was very selfish on our part. We didn't want all of our projects to be interrupted. And so we tried to just be creative to find ways to keep that momentum going.
Thank you very much. I think we can go back to Muhammad Abu Samra and see if his mic is working. Then we move to Megid. محمد شيل المايك وكلمنا في الكمبيوتر، شيل الايرفونز ارميها. Still.
It might be, Mohammed, if you want to put your question or your comment in the chat, that might be another way if we're unable to get your audio.
Okay, until you put it on the chat, I will go to Megid, who's been raising his hand. Megid, please. تفضل. Megid, you're muted.
Okay, you listen to me?
Yes.
Okay, good evening, Jem, and all the audience. Thank you for your presentation. My name is Megid Youssef. I am an associate professor in Beirut University in Lebanon, the place that you visited before. I have a very simple question regarding the placemaking. Something related to the health point of view for the pandemics and the spread of pandemics. Should the architects and the urban designers, should they rethink carefully and wisely while they design open spaces and public spaces approaching crowded people places like transportation places or ports and airports and so forth? Will they change the module of the dimensions of the places, the corridors, or they just will add or install technological features or elements that can reduce the effect of pandemics? Thank you.
That's a great question. I would love to hear everyone's opinion on that. I would imagine that there are 20 different opinions. My opinion would be don't overreact, right? We will get through COVID, but I think we can be smart. I think we can use it as an opportunity to put, safety measures in place. to redesign places like airports where we have large flows of people and people queuing up and things like that. So I think it can inform our work, but unfortunately, taken too far, it starts to detract from the core purpose of that we have as placemakers, and the principles of William White and young Gale, which is about bringing people together. And so I think we have to be careful not to overreact.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megid. Thanks, Jim. So Mohammed, did you paste your question? Okay, my turn. All right, I will. I actually have, as I said, I wasn't joking when I said 99 questions, but I'll try to summarize those. I try to link the experience you have to how to apply it in the Arab cities. And I don't mean planting an oak tree. I don't mean a specific design solution, but rather looking at the process. And here I would touch on Dr. Kholi's thing about the framework and the political will. There's a big difference between California and our part of the world in terms of having a bottom-up approach. So I thought if you can tell us a little bit more about two things, that would be like my first question among the 99, and I will leave it there. You mentioned the reduction of lanes in Castro Valley, and I'm familiar with the area. Because of the traffic engineering or the solutions, it wasn't possible, and I understand that. But where did the community come here? What was their voice? What is the level of engagement? How is the level of education matters, or maybe political views, or and if they were or with or against the reduction of lanes, regardless what actually happened at the end. So that's one thing, the process of participation. The other point is a little bit also about that. When the question is when did you come in as WRT? Was it on the planning scale in deciding what to do where, or WRT were commissioned after an entire project, boundaries are set, and they came in as talented designers to design a boundary that is pre-designated or pre-allocated as park or whatever. So I'm trying to see, where do the landscape architects or a firm, at what level they are engaged? Are they coming from the very top level, or after everything is settled, they come to execute in a good way? So these are the two questions, and I'll keep the other 99 later.
Okay, I will track you down to get the other 99. So great questions. I'm going to answer them in reverse. So the second question is one of my favorite topics. What is our role as landscape architects? And I think in many ways, I'm very lucky to be a part of a firm that has these other disciplines, that has planning, that has urban design. So maybe to an extent, I take for granted that these are in my toolkit. These are tools that I can use freely, in addition to my landscape architect tools. But I think that's true even if those disciplines are not in your firm or your practice. I think you, as a landscape architect, can go and engage with those expertise to advance an agenda. And I think, as I said in the beginning, I think as landscape architects, that's part of our way of looking at the world. I think we have the ability to look holistically and then pull in the expertise and the disciplines that's needed to achieve a result. And we should do that. Our first step to engaging as a landscape architect, I think just our natural tendency is to step back, right? Before we step in, we step back and say, okay, let's make sure we understand the whole context. both the physical context or the issues context. Let's make sure that we're not missing any opportunities to influence an outcome by looking too narrowly, too quickly. So I really believe that we can be leaders in that, and we should be. So for Castro Valley, which is I think the one you were asking about specifically, we did come in as a planner and an urban designer first. It was called the Redevelopment Strategic Plan, and it was the broader ambition of the community was, how do we remake our Main Street, which is a land use and a transportation problem, right? And so we did that, and that had outcomes, right? That had spin-off actions and strategies. And one of those was a detailed design of the boulevard itself, you know, so that was an implementation action from the broader redevelopment strategic plan. Again, that was a privilege to be able to be involved at both of those scales, but I think we all have that ability, and we should do it. And then in terms of, did the community support a lane reduction? It, you know, it's probably doesn't surprise anyone that Americans love their cars and are very resistant to traffic constriction and the removal of parking supply. And we run into this again and again in every community, and it never ceases to amaze me how strong those voices are. Nevertheless, there are other voices that are very strong and emerging and strengthening of people that value public space, pedestrian experience, vitality that is gained through pedestrian access and relationship with ground floor uses, all of those things, bicycle proponents. And so I think in any community, we have to start from where they are, and then we have to advance to the next step. And some communities are going to be much farther ahead in their thinking. And so we're starting from there and we're advancing that farther. Some communities are much farther behind, and we just need, for any community we enter, I think we're successful if we can get them to the next step, whatever that may be. It may not be the full ideal of how we all think of cities and places and pedestrian dominance, but that can still be our ideal, but we just have to get each community to its next step. Because if we try to take them too far, we get backlash, we get pushback, and then we don't get anywhere. So for Castro Valley, I would love to go back there now, which is probably almost 10 years later from our original work, and do the next wave of work there. And we could very well eliminate those lanes today, I think, if we got into that level of detail.
All right, thank you very much. Maybe Mohammed, he pasted his question. He said it's partially answered, but he just texted me that his mic is working. So Mohammed, go ahead. Abu Samra. It's not working.
Okay, so I can read the question. Elaborate upon the mechanisms of community participation, especially in the city scale decisions. Also, I want to know if the community had a role, not only in decision making, but also in implementation and financing these interventions. What are the mechanisms of their participation, and what is the relation with the top-down strategies on the national or regional level? So yeah, great topic. I can see that this is a topic of great interest, and you know, the way that we approach this is going to be very different in our different cultures. And I think, again, we need to start from where we are, right? And so wherever each of you is, in your institutional structure, that's obviously the starting point, and then we do all we can to advance. For the the question about the city scale decisions, I think is a good one. We have a regulatory structure in place in the US. It's called comprehensive plan, and it is a citywide plan. And in California, those are called general plans, but it's the same thing. And so it's looking at citywide strategies, as a whole: transportation networks, open space networks, economic development strategies, land use reallocations, etc., on a citywide basis. And it's a great process, and it can be done poorly and in a rubber stamp kind of way, or it can be done in an extremely engaged way that sets the table for meaningful change. And I think what we've learned is that we really need to pay attention to making the engagement process as robust as possible, because that's going to get us the best input, but it's also going to give us the best chance for empowerment of the community to carry on. Once we finish a plan and it's adopted, in a sense, we're walking away. And if there's not an engaged community to carry on, then the plan sits on a shelf. So I think, Amir, you're familiar with the let's see, I forget her last name, but Lori, who's the expert in post-disaster recovery, that has gone into communities all over the world after a disaster and help put the sort of the political mechanisms into place to recovery. And she said something very illuminating to me, which is that they're putting 80% of their effort into engagement and 20% into technical solutions. And that was a real sort of light bulb moment for me, because I think our balance in our projects is probably the reverse of that. Maybe we're putting 20% of effort into engagement and 80% into technical solutions. So I think to the extent that we can rebalance so that much more of our efforts are going out into engaging with the community, to building support with different organizations, different governmental agencies, all of the stakeholders that are going to be responsible for moving things forward, we need to put energy into engaging them.
That's actually a good point, and it takes me to my own experience in Middle East, East Africa, and also South Africa. Most of the success, I think I consider myself a bit lucky or privileged that many of the projects I worked on got actually built, but they remain limited to independent individual initiatives, whether it's a donor project or it is a private sector venture or a CSR, corporate social responsibility. But they were not scalable or replicable easily in regions where there's no voice for people, and there's no mechanisms in which allows us to object or approve or change or influence what's actually happening in our countries. It tends to be top-down approach, and that actually made me think of suggesting maybe a joint research paper or a comparison of the process, not the fund, not the end project, but rather from the process from the planning, as you indicated, and the commissioning of the planner, and how things work with the state of California versus Cairo Governorate or Beirut, or the 20-80% also is illuminating. We probably have 1 to 99, if not 0 to 100 airports. We wake up and we find parks being removed from, and historic sites in Cairo being removed or demolished, or we just wake up and we hear the decision. So it's nearly a 0 to 100. So that's probably an open thing to discuss. There was a question in the chat by Nadia. Did you ask about a book to read? Nadia is here. Nadia, suggest a book about resilient communities. So she was asking if you can suggest a book or reading. Oh, and we have also Dr. Khuli and Lobna hands up. So you want to suggest a book or maybe email us, and I'll give you the email of the group.
Yeah, there's so many. I have a 3-page bibliography that I've been assembling, so I'm happy to share that with
Okay, so
Amir, and he can share it with the group.
If you email this to me, I will email it to the group. Nadia, are you in our mailing list? I can also email it to you.
No, I am not.
Okay, I'll add you to the mailing list and I'll make sure you receive them by email. Yeah. Let's move to Dr. Khuli has his hand up again.
I think Lobna can go since I spoke before.
Mesh. Lobna, go ahead.
Then I'll go after her.
Thank you, Dr. Khuli. Actually, Jem, I liked very much your inspiring presentation and all of your projects. However, I liked the most two of your statements. One of them that before you step in, you have to step back. And this is really very thoughtful when you are dealing with the community. And the other thing, when you advise to take it easy when dealing with the issue of COVID-19 and such a similar pandemic, we can't design the people's life according to a critical and unusual situation, which is not going to last. However, I have noticed from your different projects that you have presented for us today that the type of community involvement in your project as a stakeholders is not really that much clear. I may say that I can see it more like you are giving the platform for the community to make their own placemaking, but you are not placemaking the places with them. If you can follow me. I see it more like you are designing the spaces, the open spaces for them, which allows them the opportunity for placemaking. But is this not a hands-on co-design placemaking? And let me here highlight this part of the presentation when you said that you was really surprised and happy how they dealt and they designed this alley to be their favorite weekend place by some community initiatives. So this is not the placemaking as I understand personally. This is more like an urban design, landscape design, giving the people the opportunity to put their own placemaking into place. This is a question. And the next one is, have you ever conducted a post-occupation evaluation, asking people how they feel about your designs? Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Lubna. I love these questions. And do we have an hour more to discuss? So, yes.
I have an hour.
We will take that so we don't keep people, and we'll take Dr. Khuli.
Well, let me just very briefly, because I really love these questions. I'm going to answer in reverse again. Post-occupancy, absolutely. We're trying to do this as, you know, more and more, and actually as a institutionalized part of our practice to always go back. We have a program now called Portraits of Impact, where we're going back and interviewing people that may have been affected by our projects, and looking more closely at their experience, the successes and failures of the work that we did. So yes, post-occupancy is so critical. Your first question about placemaking is so interesting, because I think everybody that you talk to, that any of us talk to, including ourselves, has a different definition of placemaking. And in fact, we have a raging debate in our practice now about what placemaking is, and if that's the right name for it, if that is too presumptuous a name, because are we making a place, or was the place already there and we are coming in and facilitating an evolution of that place? So there's just so many dimensions of the notion of placemaking that would be a great separate topic. But I think my way of thinking, which may be a little bit different from yours, is that placemaking is not necessarily done by the community and the users, but it's done in many ways. It can engage the users. They can be more prominent in the actual physical outcomes, or less prominent, and we can very easily get into a philosophical discussion about our role as designers, our egos as designers. It's a problem sometimes, and I think we are too heavy-handed sometimes. On the other hand, one of the things that I talk about a lot to my team is the notion to be able to transcend. The community voices are very diverse, and it's impossible to give every voice exactly what it's asking for. But our ability to take all those voices and to assimilate them into a very strong vision that can transcend the discussion and come back to them with a design that captures the spirit of what everyone is saying, I think is a real art. And I think that is a valid role for a designer, but not an absolute. And so I think your question is a great challenge, is to how to get the right balance between designer and citizen, and who is the most influential in the actual physical outcome. So great question.
Thank you very much, Jim.
All right, Dr. Kholi, then me, and then we leave.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I have now, if I go to your list of 8 points, I find them that there are kind of competing targets. Like if you want to achieve kind of an economic boom, that might be at the expense of the environment, or at the expense of the labor, and so on. So which negate the social equity or the ecological. So how do you decide on the priorities? That's my one question. And my reflection on the discussion is the issue, it goes back to my first point, which I raised before. It's about the institutional setup, about the urban governance. See, the United States of America is totally different than what we have here in this part of the world. Like, I'll tell you, for example, in one of the countries in the Middle East, there's supposed to be a law for local administrations. That law is not there. Decisions are made without the approval of elected council members, because there's no law there. And so the projects are not approved, but they are just proposed and then implemented without discussion or any kind of participation. And if we go to the issue of the participation, it is kind of a sham, I'll tell you that. You're not sure who is representing which interest and how decisions were made. Participation is turned to be like an exercise but they don't move next to enabling the people to take place in decision-making, such as in the case that just Lobna was mentioning, that people can be part of the decision-making here about the design. The whole thing actually lacks law. It's not inclusive, the decision-making. It's not participatory. There is no accountability. There is no accountability. And I would say, I doubt that these plans and implemented projects are responsive to real needs of the majority of the people who live in the city. So this is different than what you've just presented, okay? Furthermore, the profession in the United States is organized. I mean, for architects, they have to pass certain exams and to be member. For the planners, they have to be member of the, to pass the ACIP and stuff like this. This is not the case. So if it's not easy now to compare the 99% to 1%, it's not even the 100%, 0%. There is nothing. It's like infinity. You went into the irrational numbers, you know, remember those in mathematics? That's the case. So I don't think, I appreciate what you're saying and I understand where you come from, but I also, listening to the discussions here, it's like two different
realities.
Yeah, I mean, something different. I mean, a spaceship and just a vehicle on the road. Two different altitudes, two ways of doing the things. And I don't think that one of the issues that professionals who got education in the United States of America or in the Western schools and try to come back to their countries, try to implement what they have learned, they are alienated because they are speaking a different language. They are not able to participate and put that into motion. And I'm not sure that that's that the United States or donor groups will be able to help that, because that has to come from the people in the Middle East. That's my comment.
Yeah.
It's nothing about your presentation.
No,
thank you, Amir, for giving me the opportunity to blow the steam. Thank you.
Thanks, yeah, Dr. Kholi. This is very important, and it's an ongoing discussion, and that's why the idea of, as a group, of working together on mapping this process, and we put together the. I like that Dr. Kholi pushed it from the 0 to 100% to the balance to infinity, meaning even the platform doesn't exist. It's not there but not active. No, it doesn't exist, especially in this era. Probably we had a little bit of that 2-3 decades back, even with right wing or maybe with authoritarian regimes or whatever. But that is an inviting conversation to have what cultural differences and different frameworks influence the two different processes.
Amir, can I make just couple of comments?
Sure, of course.
Because I think Mr. El-Kholei is making some really important points, and I would love to have the opportunity to dig in further. So I hope we have the chance to interact at some point in the future. But two things I wanted to say. I can't begin to understand the depth of the differences between our cultures. Maybe I can begin because I've had tiny bit of exposure. So I want to recognize that what you're raising is a huge issue. I also want to suggest that let's work on a specific instance, a specific neighborhood. And to me, we get discouraged all the time in our political and social structure. And I find that we, as long as the discussion remains abstract, we remain discouraged. But if we can take the discussion to a specific instance, a neighborhood, a certain site, and then we can try to find what resources we have available to advance the agenda for that site, for that neighborhood, who are the local community people that are active. You know, where do we have thread of a connection to a local official, and, you know, start putting those threads together to, you know, to advance an agenda. Then the conversation can become productive. So I just wanted to say that. For the economic priorities that you raised, it's another really great question. If the creation of economic opportunity and jobs is at the expense of the environment, then our goals are in conflict. And I would challenge us all to look at whose accounting system we're using, because if our policies are to the detriment of environment, it means our accounting view is not looking far enough into the future. And so I want to challenge all of us to use the right accounting methods, the right time frame for accounting for impacts.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Kholi, and thank you, Jim, and thank you, everyone. It's been 2 hours. It's been long. Thanks. It stretched a little bit beyond what is planned. Thanks for those who stayed with us to the end, and thanks for the very intelligent questions and fruitful conversation. I have to put it to an, I received some messages that people will need to go. So thank you, Jim. And we hope we will have you again to talk about different projects and maybe your future ventures and plans. Thank you very, very much. وشكرا جميعا. We'll leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Such a pleasure to be able to meet you all, and shukran. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
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 Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.